So, it is October 7th, and I recorded something back in July for the Isle of Armor involving predictions. And as time went on, I had thought of some other things and so on and so forth to include with what I think to be limited information on what has been leaked from the Isle of Armor update and so on and so forth. Who knows? I might be aware of everything. I certainly don't want to check because as much as it might not potentially ruin my enjoyment, don't like spoilers. Hopefully that's understandable. But yeah, so that's basically what this is going to be. Also, I am seriously considering cutting stuff out and saving it for when I do everything, because once again, this is for the 2020, and if I'm going to end up being right about something, I really want it to be, I really want to have it on the record rather than, oh, it came out a year later or something like that. It's not impressive. I don't believe you that you actually were able to predict this and so on and so forth, especially if I get the more incredible ones right, which, who knows. But yeah, so I will be saving stuff, but I am going to have the predictions because, my god, what did it end up being like? It ended up being like taking up an hour or something like that for the stuff that I just got done. I don't know. But anyways, so queuing back to the July now. So Hop basically says that Sonya went to a cold place instead of the hot place that is the Isle of Armor. And that's the other thing. The implication that regardless of what the weather is, it's hot and humid, so that further suggests that's at least close to the equator in the same way that Johto and Hoenn presumably are. And this also brings up the question if part of the Galar region is actually on the equator or not. And you're asking, well, what about the fucking snow? The answer is very simple. Vanillux. Snow warning Vanillux. That also at least potentially explains Galarian Mr. Mime being the original variant of Mr. Mime, and when it was brought to warmer climates, it couldn't generate the ice and thawed out, literally, because it was an ice type, and stuff like that, and so the palms became enlarged and all that. So, because it kind of seems like Snover and... like, what I'm expecting with the Crown Tundra is that Snover and Abomasnow are found there, and if not, well, I don't really have much of an answer, I guess. Because you see a number of locations in the Pokemon world, especially, but I think the most glaring in particular is, what was it? It's the route that's right east of Dendemil Town. Like, if you look at the actual map of it, it's stunning how much of the place there's absolutely no snow in. And the implication is these Pokemon were brought to these climates, or these areas and so on and so forth, and the snow was generated by them, and their snow warning ability. And so I'm expecting that the Abomasnow and Snover were brought to Galar through the Crown Tundra, and through Kalos, to Sinnoh, because as it stands, the Crown Tundra needs to have some connection to Sinnoh, Kalos, and Hoenn in order to have the Regis, in order to have these one-to-one redesigns of the Regi chambers found only in Platinum, and of course the X and Y. But yeah, so anyways, so I expect, yeah, Sonya's going to show up there. And not only that, but I think that after we've done something in the Crown Tundra, we'll come back to the Isle of Armor to take care of what Mustard is saying when he says the next step. I don't think we're done with the Isle of Armor. Well, we are for now, but I don't think we're entirely done for the Isle of Armor because he says that we'll see. So, unless this is being saved for that, what I'm pretty sure would now have to be a sequel to Sword and Shield, more than anything. Because now the fucking expansion passes are a thing, so why are they going to make a glorified remake when they can just make a fucking sequel before everything's said and done? And on top of that, because you can go to the Isle of Armor,
because you can go to the Isle of Armor before you've beaten Leon, and that's after that it scales to you. I think the idea is that any sort of things that should be the case in the Isle of Armor, and at the very least the wild area, will be the case in those games. Because if I'm right about the Dynamax dens being craters, and I also imagine that we are going to explore something. I mean, I imagine Hop is going to help us with exploring something, and I also imagine in the same way, because I played Sword and whatnot and got to it, that in the same way as before you clearing the main game, if you talk to Mustard, he'll say you just have to wait until your player or whatever does what they have to do, which is literally, of course, going through the main post-game, if you want to call it that. The post-game story and stuff like that, because for Hop to show there, he has to at least be an assistant of Sonia's. Also, before you see that, Sonia and Hop will still be at the lab and whatnot, and afterwards, of all people to replace them, I guess, would be the assistant telling you about Sword and Shieldbert. Which to me suggests that we're not entirely done with them, or at the very least, if anyone's essentially done with them, I think that Game Freak has plans for them for some reason. Because otherwise, why say that they're doing, community service and the like? I don't know. Other than to, I guess, cut that loose end and stuff like that. But I imagine after you get to a certain point in the Crown Tundra, if you talk to Sonia and whatnot, she'll say, "Hey, did you happen to run into Hop or something like that? I had him show up in the Isle of Armor, and so when you go to the Isle of Armor and you take care of that, you come back and deal with the rest of the Crown Tundra." That's my guess, at least. Yeah, I imagine that's the case. I also don't know if the Crown Tundra is going to scale to us, or if the idea is we can't go to the Crown Tundra until we've taken care of the Isle of Armor, which I don't think is the case. I do, at the very least, at maximum, I think we'd have to defeat Leon, but I don't think that would... Honestly, I don't entirely see that being a requirement, and yeah, I'll see if I got that right. I don't know what else I would want to predict. There's not really that much to predict. Oh, there's one thing that I did want to talk about, because it does relate to the Dynamax dens and stuff like that. The tree that you have to shake, of all fucking things, to get the max honey is, the only way to explain it, as far as I can tell, is that the tree is growing from a Dynamax den. And so, presumably, if that's the case, that tree wasn't initially there. And this might actually further suggest that actually, yes, AZ may have actually planted the fucking tree. As for entirely why, I couldn't really tell you, other than maybe a place for the Vespa Queen to have their place, because it's my speculation that AZ came to Alola first, before the Crown Tundra. Well, yeah, maybe the Crown... Well, no, I think it came to the Crown Tundra first, because I think the Crown Tundra, at the very least, would have been connected to the Kalos region. Yeah, I imagined that it was connected to the Kalos region in the past, but, I think I probably might have gotten already into that, future me had, and whatnot. I don't want to keep going with this, but yeah, so the movements I have currently. AZ, at least in some cases, went to the Crown Tundra, then to Galar Main, then to Unova, at least in some cases. Black 2 and White 2 in particular. Then, presumably came back to Galar. I don't know where he went from there, honestly. This is assuming that he didn't even stay in Unova. Because, what I think to be the case is, no, I think he left Unova and then eventually made his way to Sinnoh, and then he was there with the Sinnoh people when Arceus created a new, either Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina. I've probably already said, future me has already probably said something to this effect, but I guess I'm helping quote on him. Whatever. Then he came to Johto with the Tribe of Elf, and he didn't come to Kalos right away, at least. Well, no, he kind of probably did come to Kalos, because Sinnoh and Kalos and Johto would have been connected at that point in time. So from there, he probably ended up in Hoenn, and that's how he gets there why he's there 1,000 years, and so on and so forth. And from what he did there, I would say Alola, but only in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and then the Crown Tundra. Fucking hell. The Isle of Armor, and planted that tree there. I don't think Combee show up in the Alola Islands, so there does seem to be something that I might be missing if that's the case. Because apparently what looks like it's supposed to be a snowflake is supposed to be shaped like a honeycomb. You could have fucking fooled me, but hey, they're not in the Sundex. They're found in Kalos, but not the Isle of Armor. Or they're found. Well, they're obviously found in the fucking Isle of Armor, but they're found in the rolling fields. And it seems like unless there's going to be Combee there, I don't know. Yeah, you can't find Vespiquen in other areas, and you can only find Combee in the rolling hills. But yeah, like I think that's about it for my predictions. So yeah, I think I'm going to begin the end of this. Yeah, pretty much. Members of the trio spend their time together. Each one has a slightly different taste of nectar. It ceaselessly gathers nectar from sunrise to sundown, all for the sake of the Vespiquen and the swarm. I mean, okay, well, you can actually find Vespiquen in the wild area, so that's not entirely true. So I guess, I don't know, like, we still have to see, like, how long the Crown Tundra is and trying to figure out, like, because we kind of have, I've seen enough of the leaks to at least have a general idea that, yeah, the Crown Tundra is going to be fucking huge and long on top of that. In vertical length, I guess. Tall, I guess? No, that's wrong. So, I don't know. I think that's... actually, yeah. I think that's where I ended, so... yeah.
Okay, so, now that we're back to October 6th, at least that's when I'm doing this now, the other things that I want to predict, and so on and so forth. And I'll just use my little cheat notes here. I wish I had this in a more from most predictable to least predictable, or rather most likely to least likely. But anyways, let's go with it. So, the first thing, basically Sycamore appearing in the Crown Tundra to discover the Zygarde cube inside one of the Regi ruins and give us a replica. That might seem like something of a strange thing for some people because it's like, well, you're talking about the Zygarde cube, and of course you're talking about Sycamore, which is a character that hasn't appeared in a Pokemon game since, at this point it'll have been fucking 7 years. It's very close to being 7 years. On top of that, he's only appeared in one of those in that one game that is X and Y. So why would he appear? Well, I suspect that Diamond and Pearl remakes are coming out next year. I know this is the thing that everyone's been going like, we've been suspecting this for a very long time. But the other thing is that next year will be the 15th anniversary, and that might mean nothing, but it's also worth pointing out that some of this does mean something. I mean, if it would have released back in 2018, which I think it was going to originally release in 2018, then it would have come out instead of Let's Go. And because I actually do think that they had problems and so on and so forth, that they decided to postpone it. And I think they would have actually had it come out this year if it wasn't for the Crown Tundra to give them time to work on it and so on and so forth. Because the other thing is, 2018 would have been the 12th anniversary, just like a Mega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and that at least got its final director on the 10th anniversary of Ruby and Sapphire, so there probably was something being discussed back on the 10th anniversary of Diamond and Pearl, and by the way, that also lines up potentially close to when Let's Go began development and so on and so forth. Like in July or something like that, they said it'd be about or around 2 years, and that would be only 2 months off from September, which is when the 10th anniversary of Diamond and Pearl would have been. But who knows? The main thing is, Sycamore might be appearing in those Diamond and Pearl games for one of two reasons. The biggest reason being the fact that Professor Sycamore is, well, a former student of Professor Rowan's, and you might be saying to yourself, well, that in itself means absolutely nothing, and you're 100% correct about that. The difference is, if I'm not mistaken, the first leak from Pokemon Home was talking about the Kalos starters as well as the Sinnoh starters, or didn't have the data or whatever, or something to that effect. It's been a while, but it was specifically the Colossus starters and the Sinnoh starters. So why would you do that? Well, as we know, since Heart Gold and Soul Silver, excluding Let's Go, remakes have been in the habit to allow us to obtain other regional starters. Heart Gold and Soul Silver allowed us to obtain the Kanto starters and the Hoenn starters. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire allowed us to obtain the Sinnoh, Johto, Unova. Yeah, I think those starters as well. It wouldn't have been the Kanto starters because that was in X and Y, and of course it wouldn't have been the Colossus starters because of X and Y, and so on and so forth. And we only had 6 at the time, so yeah, that seems to check out with my memory if nothing else. Or my memory checks out with that, whatever. But the thing is, the question of why Sycamore, and once again, I've said it because of the Regi Ruins. Because the Regi Ruins, obviously, 2 of the Regis are based off of Xerneas and Yveltal, which we know that Sycamore was also researching. Like, he was still fucking researching that shit at the end of X and Y. And some of his theories are also, I've already said that I've already found a number of his reactions and so on and so forth very questionable in relation to that, and it would be very cathartic to see Sonya point that out. That, once again, that in itself may mean nothing, but the fact that I can just picture how their personalities will just bounce off one another so well, like, it is a prediction, but there's other things as well. The other thing is, as you might have heard me say, discovered the Zygarde Cube. In Sun and Moon and Omega Ruby, I always get those confused. In Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, we are told that Sycamore discovered the Zygarde Cube, seemingly off-screen. If Sycamore were to discover the Zygarde Cube in the Crown Tundra, that would of course mean that Sword and Shield takes place, yes, before Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So that would be a thing to have a placement as well. The other thing is if Sycamore appears in Diamond and Pearl Remix and it's a younger version of Sycamore, that might actually be noticeable from the differences of the models. As you may remember, I think I've gone over this somewhat. You can see that Sycamore is supposed to look just a little older. He has like bags under his eyes, and he has the permastubba or whatever it is, the little bits of hair on his chin or something like that. Yeah, I guess it assumes that those bits would actually be seen on the model, and maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. I can't really say. But if those bits were on there, then the lacking of it would also be a pointer to say that yes, Diamond and Pearl Remix actually do take place before not just X and Y, because of course, but also because of him appearing at the Crown Tundra. The other thing is, of course, the fact that clearly they are doing research on the legendaries still as far as Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Now, as for how you would obtain a replica, I think that maybe, just maybe, Sycamore might come upon the Zygarde Cube. So apparently, on one hand, Sycamore's people in X and Y were doing research on Rotom to some degree. On the other hand, in the artwork for Rotom, it shows Clement. But then again, Clement is also the gym leader of Lumiose, which is where Professor Sycamore is standing by, so maybe he might actually make a relation to that. Maybe the Zygarde Cube replica might actually be one that was built by Clement. Who can really say? But the question then is, okay, so are they going to go the Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon route where we just have to battle Sycamore or something like that, like we did with Dexio, in order to get the Zygarde Cube and then at least a percentage of Zygarde? Actually, I'm blanking on whether a Zygarde Complete has been shown in any of the trailers yet. So I don't know if it would be necessary to battle Sycamore, but the fact that we battled Dexio and the fact that we battled Sycamore before, and on top of that, all of the Pokemon that he could use in battle, at the very least, if we're talking about the Kanto starters, are obviously, as of the Isle of Armor, all a part of the Galar Dex. So battling him is also, if he were to show up, and assuming that he'd only use those 3 Pokemon, he'd probably include some more. As for what, I couldn't really tell you. That much is at least covered. Yeah, I think that was the first part that makes sense. The other thing, so the second guess, and so things that might happen and so on and so forth, is a combination or just a certain group or whatever of either Professor Burnett and Lily, Looker and Annabelle, or the Ultra Recon Squad appearing because of the Ultra Beast being confirmed in a mission/quest thing like the Regis, Birds, and Calyrex supposedly will. I read that basically verbatim
from my notes.
But yeah, because the other thing that's been confirmed is the reveal glass. And as we know, Professor Burnett was doing research on the, what is it? Tarian trio or whatever it was. Like, no, Tarian forms were, the Kami trio, that's what they're called. And while the Kami trio had their Tarian forms introduced in Black 2 and White 2, in X and Y, it is stated by one of the scientists that the material from the walls of Reflection Cave, which are obviously natural mirrors and whatnot, can be made into reveal glasses. And reveal glass is, alongside the Zygar Cube, something that has actually been leaked from the Isle of Armor, and actually has been mentioned, apparently, by name of those leaks. So the other thing is also that Professor Burnett is the one who gives you the reveal glass in Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, but the fact that she did research on it is the reason why she gives you that as well. Now, here's the thing. So it's now October 7th. Shit happened. Had to start again here. So anyways, the thing that I don't know if I'm sure about is two things. First and foremost, if Lily and Burnett both show up in this game, then, well, I guess it really depends, because on one hand, there's nothing saying that Sword and Shield can't essentially take place 3 months before Sun and Moon or Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. It's just a question of, would Burnett really take Lily to the Galar region in that time? Because otherwise, if Lily was to appear with Burnett, there'd be a question of, well, what does this actually mean? Like, if you're given a quote-unquote replica, or we'll go with a replica built by Clement or something to that effect, by Sycamore because he's had it long enough for that to be a thing, then that alone could be it. I mean, the other thing is, both the Reveal Glass and the Zygar Cube sound like things that you would receive via Stow-on Side, the bargain market or something like that, because we've already done that for the Solarizer, the Lunarizer, and the DNA Splicers at the very least. The other thing is, it doesn't seem like we would be running into the Kami trio on our own. Well, it won't be something like we're doing with the Ultra Beast and so on and so forth. At best, it seems like it will be while we're in the Dynamax dens, in which case, Burnett maybe not the best choice by comparison, but we'll see. The next one is the more obvious choice, Looker and Annabelle. So the Looker and Annabelle thing is simply for the fact that obviously they're going to be the ones, like we see it in Sun and Moon, they are trying to get the Ultra Beast and so on and so forth. So them showing up to partake in that is not much of a stretch for me. The question is whether it's going to be made clear that this is the Annabelle and Looker from Sun and Moon, or if it's the one from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Because there is a genuine question of, okay, how many Ultra Wormholes opened up in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon versus Sun and Moon? Offhand, I couldn't really tell you, but that's one situation. And then, of course, the other group it could possibly be are the Ultra Recon Squad, because, of course, the Ultra Recon Squad would be such people looking for the Ultra Beasts. It's just a question of what's going to make more sense, because Looker probably makes the most sense once again, because like Sycamore, if Looker is going to show up, the other thing is, like, Looker has showed up in every game since Platinum, barring Black 2 and White 2. Yeah, and I guess Let's Go, if we're going to count it. So it wouldn't be too surprising to see Looker of all people. It's just alongside Annabelle would be the question. But the other thing is, of course, Diamond and Pearl remakes. Is Looker going to be part of those games, or is he going to be excluded like Scott and Juan and the Battle Frontier brains or whatever were in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire? Remains to be seen, obviously. I think that's basically the thoughts of question 2 being done and so on and so forth. Yeah. So the next one is going to seem a little odd, but if Sycamore is actually here to discover the Zygarde Cube and so on and so forth, then this next one would be possible, make sense, and so on and so forth. And that's Blue showing up, because if Sycamore hasn't yet discovered the Zygarde Cube at this point in time, Blue showing up because he's not yet a facility leader for the Battle Tree is not only possible, but the reason why he would be there is he's doing research for Professor Oak, because in Platinum, Professor Oak was researching, or at least some of his research seemed to dovetail with the legendary birds showing up in Sinnoh. So why wouldn't Blue be there, potentially, at the very least, to do research on the Galarian legendary birds? I don't see a problem with that, but once again, it's just a matter of the timeline, like where this is. So yeah, Blue showing up in the Crown Tundra is at least a possibility. And we'll get back to this somewhat when we get to a certain thing. But next is Green showing up on the Isle of Armor because she has 5-6 of her Pokemon that she has in Let's Go are already in the Galar Dex by the Isle of Armor. Clefable, Gengar, Ninetales, Kangaskhan, and Blastoise. She's still missing the Victory Bell, and as far as I can tell, while it's not necessarily deconfirmed or anything like that, Victory Bell doesn't seem like it's going to be in. And if there was a place where Victory Bell would show up, it would have been the Isle of Armor. So it's certainly nowhere near a guarantee for this reason. But the main reason in particular is, of course, that I speculate she is an older daughter of Honey and Mustard. So as a result, like if she were to show up and so on and so forth, because I'm doing this, because this video is going to come out before everything else, the reason is that there are some similarities in the fact that just comparing Honey and Green in appearances, and I know that in itself isn't enough. But the biggest thing in particular is the question of how old is Honey, really? Because we know that Honey, by her own words, she was still working at her job when Mustard came back from his post-retirement globetrotting and whatnot. And we also know that, according to one of Honey's league cards, I think it was her regular league card or whatever you would call it, it's basically said that they met when she was in Galar doing business, and that basically they married shortly after. And considering the time frame of, oh, Mustard was champion for 18 years, he became champion about 50 years, so that's like 49 to 48 years, give or take. And so, like, 31 to 30 years ago, Mustard was no longer champion. He was dethroned and so on and so forth. But he was still in Galar, not on retirement, until basically him being told by Rose's predecessor, I believe. Yeah, I think it was predecessor, to win a rigged match. That's when he decided to go into retirement and so on and so forth. So it's not clear other than the fact that it seems like, from my speculation, that Leon came to train at Mustard's before becoming champion, and that's specifically why he came to train there. As a result, you have at least 8 to 9 years when Leon returned and so on and so forth, and it's because, as Leon says, Hop is still growing, and they're not that, like, Leon's not that much taller than Hop. And on top of that, the fact that Hop has basically said that the reason that Leon wanted to become champion in the first place is because he said he would for Hop. So all of this evidence would suggest that they can't be that far apart from one another, and it also gives him the motive to train under Mustard, Leon. As a result of that, there's a genuine question of how long has it actually been? Because, like, you see at least 2 of the people training under Mustard are a youngster and a schoolboy, and they can potentially be as young as 6. Because remember, Leon became champion at the age of 10, and he also considers himself an adult. So he has to be 18, it has to have been at least 8 years, and so on and so forth. But by virtue of everything else, 9 would also have to be the max as well. So potentially, I would put it 12 to 13 years, because if I'm not mistaken, Mustard refers to Leon training at the Master Dojo on the Isle of Armor and all that a long time ago, so we don't have an exact specific point in time. However, 4 years of training might be enough, possibly. And as a result, we have like this time span of 31 to 12 years, potentially. Somewhere in between there, like, is Mustard retiring and so on and so forth. The thing that's not made clear is when exactly did Mustard retire, because the retirement is the cutoff point, and Mustard becoming champion is, I'm going to say, the max cutoff point that Mustard and Honey were married and so on and so forth. And so the question is, because when you meet Hyde, Honey specifies that he's her darling only son. That's strangely specific by any metric. Wouldn't you only say that if it implied, oh, I have at least a daughter, if not more than one daughter, and so on and so forth. So the other thing is also the fact of the question, once again, the question of Honey's age, based on all of that. The other thing, though, is that you can look at Honey and you say, well, she has blue eyes. Well, then look at Mustard's eyes. They are a significant shade of brown and so on and so forth. Then look at Green. This, what is it? Crosspatch Kids? Like, they already apparently have that to some degree with Hyde. So, crosspatching them to get Green is at least plausible. The question is, are they going to do it or not? We will see, if nothing else. Because if Blue and Green show up, specifically if Green shows up, the question is, like, is she going to be older or younger than she is in Let's Go? Or is she going to be the same age? Because this is where I would circle into the next prediction. It's no guarantee, obviously. And if I were to rate my predictions in plausibility to me, Sycamore maybe not the highest, but at least plausible. Professor Burnett and Lily, once again, it depends if the 3 months is long enough, and so on and so forth. Looker and Annabelle, that is the most likely. The Ultra Recon Squad, I would say more likely than Burnett and Lily. Blue showing up, I mean, I could see it, but there's no guarantee, once again. And Green, in my mind, it's the most likely, but I could also see it not going that way as well. So, with Steven Stone, though, it's possible, if not plausible, but the question is if they're going to do it or not. But the main reason is because apparently the Hoenn starters are confirmed. And in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Steven Stone apparently does have on hand the Hoenn starters to give. The other thing is, thanks to Tierno, of all people in X and Y, and the Fossil Maniac in Orez, we know he's been to Kalos. Tierno says he got the Intriguing Stone from the Wandering Stone Collector, and the Fossil Maniac in Orez specifies that that is what Steven calls himself. So it's hard to deny that this is the case. The other thing is that Galar is supposedly right across the pond from Kalos. And the closer that Sword and Shield happens in relation to X and Y, the more likely this is the case. Because if Sycamore just discovered the Zygarde Cube, then it happening in a short enough time that Steven Stone could show up. And that's, to me, is what makes it plausible. Because the other thing is, actually, yeah, I think that would be enough for Steven Stone. The next part is Regieleki and Regidrago. I believe those are its names. And future me will correct the record if they aren't. But, in all likelihood, by the very nature of Regieleki having the same color scheme as Xerneas, and Regidrago being obviously based on Yveltal, they're probably a part of a new trio, and there is one that is based on Zygarde. And, in all likelihood, the reason there'd be another trio is there's going to probably be a regional variant, a new regional variant, I suppose, of Regigigas. Now, Regigigas is apparently confirmed for the Crown Tundra. The question is, does that preclude a regional variant or whatever of it in those games? Or are they going to go a different route entirely? Because it's the question of, first and foremost, are there going to be messages for us to read that are essentially the equivalent of what we see in the sealed chamber? Whether they're in Braille is going to be questionable, and honestly, I'd sooner see us get something like we do in Black 2 and White 2 to decode the Braille, but who knows, maybe they'll actually have Braille in this. I couldn't really tell you. However, what is it that we were told in Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald? And there is a question of, well, were they referring to Regigigas back then, or were they referring just to the Regis and so on and so forth? And there's definitely a question of that. However, what's to say that they won't be doing this essentially in preparation for Diamond and Pearl Remix as well? And the Diamond and Pearl Remix won't have the regional variant of Regigigas instead in Snowpoint Temple, or the equivalent of Snowpoint Temple, because in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, if you go by the things that you're told in the translation, because the translation is not only different, but it also specifies that it was sealed alone in the dark. That description alone disqualifies them to be talking about the Regigigas that you find inside Regigigas' chamber. very nature of Regigigas being there. So the question then is, what are they actually talking about? Well, they can't be talking about Snowpoint Temple, because Snowpoint Temple, you run into other Pokemon there. What I actually think that this is referring to is the one that you find inside Twist Mountain. Twist Mountain, at least the chamber where Regigigas was supposedly in, was apparently sealed up until 2 years ago or something to that effect, and that probably would result in there being no light in there. The other thing is you can't find any Pokemon inside that chamber, so I think they actually are talking about it. And so if Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire is instead referring to the Regigigas that was sealed in Twist Mountain instead, then the question then becomes, is that going to be the case in Snowpoint Temple? Is Snowpoint Temple going to have Regigigas or not? And if it's a regional variant, if that ends up happening, that of course ties a loose end, which is of course, I wouldn't say Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but yeah, does the Diamond and Pearl remake actually follow with Regigigas being sealed away in Twist Mountain instead of Snowpoint Temple? I couldn't really tell you. But yeah, they could basically give us similar fucking messages inside the Crown Tundra that are parallel with Regigigas, and especially because you do have to ask the question, like, where exactly has the Braille gone? Because once again, the Apricorns, where have these Braille messages gone? The people that would write these Braille messages, because you've got Hoenn, and then you've got the Sevi Islands, and then nothing, basically. So, once again, question of, is the Crown Tundra going to have Braille, or is it not? Because apparently it would seem that they didn't go to the Sinnoh region, or at least not to the Sinnoh region we saw, unless, I don't know, the Sinnoh language is Braille, which I doubt. But yeah, so I think that's a good point right there to end that. So the next part. Oh god. Okay, so basically, I am expecting a bombshell when Peony gives us his Common League card. Because this is how Mustard's Common League card starts out. Mustard is the former fighting type gym leader, is regarded as one of the strongest champions in Galar's history, reigning undefeated for 18 years. How is that not a bombshell? Yeah, so I'm expecting something like that, and I've got like 3 guesses, and to varying degrees, they could all be right, who knows. Guess number 1, he is the former champion before Leon beat him 8 to 9 years. The other possible connection is that he is Rose's predecessor that tried to convince Mustard to win a rigged match. As this is mentioned in Mustard's Rare League card, it's most likely public information. I mean, it's a Rare League card, not a one-of-a-kind, even though Mustard clearly gives us one that's partially bent. But then we'll get into the other question, of course, is, are Peony and Mustard biologically related anyway? Peony has his black hair with gray growing from the scalp, green eyes, and his mighty motif dovetails with what we're told by Olina. So perhaps they are biologically related. Hard to say if they're brothers or father and son, or whether Daisy, as she's called, is actually his biological daughter or not, in a similar way to Beta. However, what we know about Rose is he is a rambling and somewhat impulsive trainer who came in second place in a previous Champion Cup, just like Hop. Whether Peony is supposed to mirror you as one of Rose's best friends, or whether he is Rose's brother who became champion at that point is unclear. All that can be said is that just like Peony is in the Crown Tundra trying to find out the truth about the legendary Pokemon in the area, Rose's research into the Darkest Day eventually centered around finding the truth about Eternatus to solve Galar's eventual energy crisis. It could be just a coincidence, but Rose and Peony seem to be somehow linked, as weak sauce as that might sound. As such, getting a quiet moment from both Peony and Beta on Rose's actions, and turning himself in isn't the most unpredictable scenario. As for whether this means Olina will appear in the Crown Tundra to investigate the Dynamax Den, and whether this will trigger her being replaced with Rose at Galar Mine number 1, alongside potentially Swordward and Shieldbert, each of them doing their community service, also remains to be seen. Yes, in the recent trailer, it's clear that Peony is of a darker complexion than Rose. The question is, does that actually mean anything or not? I couldn't really tell you. But there is probably some connection. And then the other question is, like, is he related to anyone in particular beyond that? Once again, I couldn't tell you, because we're left to guess. However, that to me would be the step-off point for that. And now, the final prediction. And I'd argue it is what I would put as the most unlikely. And I'll just say it again because, like, at the time I post this, they won't be aware. I've basically eaten a crow and basically said that I was wrong about Lysandra being the father of Lusamine. At least, I don't want to keep that up. So if I end up being right on this, good, I suppose. But the main thing is, this is what I call Conspiracy Corner. And it's the question of, are there plans to have a version of Lysandra that didn't go off the deep end? And if so, why would they do this before an X and Y remake? Why would they do this before that? What possible utility could they do for this? But yeah, let me just put forward now. Okay, well, hold on. Why would Lysandra be there? And the answer is very simple. He might be potentially working alongside Steven Stone, as the Hallcaster is an app on the PokéNav Plus. Also, Steven Stone appearing at the Silphco's main building suggests that they're business partners with Devon, and the Galarian Normal Gym is sponsored by Silphco. Thus, Lysandra and Rose could be now former business partners. As I said before, Galar is seemingly right across the pond from Kalos. So basically, if Sword and Shield take place in a different timeline than X and Y, and it's my speculation that by the very nature of, like, there's a ton of things in particular. The biggest one is that Mewtwo is encountered in X and Y. And the reason this is important is because in Crystal and Gold and Silver, Cerulean Cave has collapsed, and it's only in Heart Gold and Soul Silver that it has been reconstructed. The other thing is kind of the lack of Pokemon from the Hoenn region that, in theory, should exist in the Kalos region if they do exist in the Galar region. Not necessarily entirely, but the biggest thing is the question of whether Ruby and Sapphire, I guess it really just might be as simple as, oh, Sword and Shield don't take place in the same timeline as X and Y, therefore Lysandra doesn't necessarily go off the deep end. And so, as a result of that, what influence would he have on the Pokemon world if that weren't the case? Because once again, the biggest thing that I cite in particular is that Looker does not allude to Team Flare in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, even though by all metrics he absolutely should. He alludes to Team Galactic, he alludes to Team Plasma, but not Team Flare. The other thing is, we've seen from Let's Go that it is entirely possible that Sycamore could have given out Pokedexes or whatever to the 5 kids from the Kalos region or whatever. Trainers? I don't know. Without Lysandra going over the deep end. The other thing is also the question of what exactly would have to be the case for Lysandra to not be as pessimistic as he ends up being. And it could just be as simple as there was no Kalos War, because that is where a lot of it seems to stem from. It's just, there's a number of things that are definitely up for question. But the biggest thing is, if Sycamore is going to show up, then such a Lysandra showing up, well, not a guarantee. It'd certainly be a what the fuck moment. But I do have my speculation as to why now, why would they do this, why would they do it now, and you'll have to wait until the next year, and I'll try to have that out, lest every fucking problem under the sun doesn't happen. Unless everything under the sun, including whatever. So yes. The other thing is this would confirm one of a few different things. The biggest thing is there any relation whatsoever to Lysandra and Sonia? So here's the thing. If Sonia and Lysandra were to meet, and Sonia would have no idea that Lysandra is her grandfather, or even imply it, and there wasn't enough to imply that this might potentially be the case, then as far as I'm concerned, that's the fucking kiss of death. Unless later games further suggest this to be the case, and it's not just hinting, it is like winking at you or something like that. Unless that ends up being the case, because once again there's a genuine question of, is Professor Magnolia a former redhead like Sonia, or is she a former brunette? I could see it going either way, really, because we see the small little picture on Sonia's her desk in her room, and as far as I can tell, what's supposed to be her mother has red hair and her father is a brunette. That's what I'm getting from that, the best that I can see of that picture. That's the other thing. I think it's actually pretty likely, but not guaranteed, that Sonia, she might actually give you some of her league cards, because not only does Mustard give us a league card that has the Master Dojo insignia on it, but so does Honey. On top of the rare league card having the Galarian League insignia, if I'm not mistaken. So we could receive both Sonia's, I guess, her rare league card, which is probably when she was taking the gym challenge with Leon, and a league card that basically gives us a little more delving into what exactly she's doing and now going to do, and so on and so forth, the specifics. I think that's basically it. So yeah,